The counselling job market. Is it oversaturated, or is there actually a really high demand for counsellors and therapists today? Before I get into answering that question, here was an interesting statement on the BACP website, which if you watched my last video, you'd know is one of the professional governing bodies of counsellors and psychotherapists in the UK, and they are quite important because they make decisions on our profession. So here's what they said on their website, and I'm going to be reading off my laptop, so excuse me for not making eye contact. They said, the opportunities for paid employment in the counselling field is increasing, but there are still not enough jobs for everyone who's professionally trained. Many roles are part-time or voluntary. We would not recommend going into private practice straight after training. It is safer for newly qualified therapists to work somewhere where they will be allocated appropriate clients and will receive peer support. I totally understand, and I agree with their statement, the second half of their statement. The first half of their statement, I think, is definitely true. There are more opportunities, and I'll get into that in a bit. But I would just like to say, one of my previous therapists that I had a few months ago, last year, literally said to me that as soon as she qualified, she started private practice. She's never worked in the NHS. She's never worked for a company. She started a private practice straight away. She said obviously business was slow to begin with because you have to build up your clientele, but now she seems to be in a really good place financially and business wise. She said like things that it took some time, but she's kind of, I guess, where she wants to be. So I guess I say that to say, don't let anybody tell you you can't, because you can, especially if you put your mind to it and you believe you can do it. Who's to tell you that you can't? And I guess my therapist, for me anyway, is proof that it can happen and it is possible to go straight into private practice when you qualify. I do agree with their reasons as to why you shouldn't. And for me personally, my plan isn't to start a private practice immediately, but is to work for a private practice, gain my experience, and then start my own private practice later on. I have heard that there's been a high demand for counsellors in Australia for many years now. So if you're planning to move to Australia and you want to work as a counsellor or therapist, Australia is a good way to go if it's in your plans, because the demand has been high over there, and by the looks of it, it's still increasing. I don't know why, but yeah, but to be honest, I think in general, not just Australia, but in the UK, in the Western world in general, I feel like there's a higher demand for counsellors and therapists and psychotherapists, simply because there's more awareness around mental health and more people are seeking therapy, more people are becoming okay with therapy as it's becoming less and less stigmatized. So it makes sense that people are going to need more therapists. But like the quote from the BACP said, it's just that there's not enough trained, qualified people, because the training is long, vigorous, and expensive. So it's quite off-putting. You know, after 1 year, 2 years, you're like, can I really carry on? If it was just a 1 year, I think we'd have a lot more therapists out there. But because the training period is so damn long, it's totally understandable why there's not that many of us out there. So for me, next year, I will be one of some new therapists starting. But from the people that started training in first year to third year, it's going to be a lot less. I think in my course alone, we probably had about maybe up to 10 people already drop out, and that was in the first year. So I can just imagine by the end of this year how many people are also going to drop out. So we started the year with about 60 people. I think now we're down to about 50-ish, maybe 40-ish. Next year we might be down to 30 or 20. And I've heard that before in the cohorts before us, that some courses started with like 50 or 60 people and they finished and only 20 people graduated. So imagine that on a national level, where there's not even that many places doing masters in counselling and psychotherapy. So as you can see by the numbers, there's a high demand for us, but the amount of us that are actually training to become psychotherapists is nowhere near as much as the demand. So all that to say, yes, there is a lot of room for us and there's a lot of demand for us. It's not an oversaturated field. It's a dehydrated, malnourished field that needs so many of us. So if you can train and you want to train, and go for it, because somebody out there needs you, somebody out there needs me. So let's get into the training as quickly as we can. And as you know, especially with the NHS, the waiting list is long, like 1 year, 2 years, 6 months. So if there's more of us in private practice or in low cost counselling services, then more people can access our services rather than having to wait in the NHS. because there is so much pressure on the NHS to provide counselling services, which they just cannot keep up with because the demand is so high. And I think also now that counsellors are becoming more common and the demand for them is so high, they're not just in private practice and hospitals anymore. They're now in schools, they're now in churches, they're now in corporate businesses. Like in-house counsellors are working for corporate companies, in-house counsellors are working for schools. So it's becoming a lot more widespread. So because we're working in more places, there is also a demand for, like, imagine for every school in your area they need at least 1 or 2 counsellors. Imagine how many jobs that creates all around the UK. The job market is very, very open for us. So now I'm going to go through some counselling job adverts that I found online last night, and then I'm going to talk through some of the stuff that are common requirements for you to be able to get a job as a counsellor or therapist or psychotherapist. So the first one that I found was this one, which strangely enough was to work in Thailand. So it looks like the need for us is not just in the Western world, it's overseas anywhere. So it was posted, it actually says, as you can see, it says London full-time, but really they want you to work in Thailand. So it just goes to show, like, we're needed everywhere really. So as you can see, this one is abroad. Because you have to be an addiction counsellor for this one, they need 5 years of experience. And you'll see this commonly in any jobs where you have to be a specialist in something, they'll need you to have experience. So for example, if you're working with trauma or abuse of some sort, or if you're working with children, they'll expect you to have maybe a few years of experience. So be aware, if you want to have a specialism in something, that you will have to build up a lot of experience. So wherever you can, just try to get as many years of experience, as many client hours as possible, and I'll get onto that at the end of the video, so stay tuned. The next one that we have is a remote CBT therapist, so which is fantastic. So if you really want to work from home, working from home is your thing. Then there's also jobs that allow counsellors to work from home, and you don't have to be face to face, you don't have to be in the office. All thanks to the pandemic, now a lot of counsellors have adapted to working online. My supervisor, I've never met her in person, she only works online. The new placement that I'm going to be starting soon is all online. Supervision and the meeting with my clients is all online. Even my interview was online. So that's like really good for people that want therapy but can't leave their house, but then also for therapists who have to be at home a lot. You don't have to travel or rent out office space, so in a way it's kind of cost effective. So for this one, the salary is really high, 41k to 49,000 for quite low hours, 22 to 37.5 hours a week. I guess that depends on how many clients you have. As you can see, it says that you have to be BACP accredited, and then you have to have been delivering CBT therapy, so you need to have experience in CBT therapy. So as you can see, accreditation and having membership is really important, like I talked about in my previous video. So this one, as long as you're registered though, I think you don't have to be accredited. I think as long as you're registered, you can get jobs with most places. I don't really think these companies know the difference between being accredited and registered. So you can always apply even if you are just registered and you're not yet accredited, because being accredited takes a bit of time. So apply anyway. So this one is an EAP counsellor. I don't know exactly what that stands for, but this one is an evening shift. So counsellors obviously one of the professions that have a really flexible pattern, because some people obviously only available in the evenings after work, and some people like early morning before they go to work and start their day. But I think our career, you can kind of pick your own hours depending on if you're working for somebody or not. So with this one, the pay is quite low. It's 29k for full-time, whereas the other one was like 41k for full-time. But the qualifications are slightly different. It says minimum of a diploma in counselling, registered with an accrediting body. So like I said, the importance of being registered within a professional body or a governing body. And also it says you have to be experienced in solution-focused counselling. So if you're able to do CPD courses where you're able to get training in trauma, grief, abuse, solution focus or family therapy, whatever it may be that you have an interest in working in, try to get as much experience as possible for it, because a lot of these jobs will be like, have experience. So try to get your experience up as much as possible. And the last one I'm going to go to is this one, which is in Birmingham and is full-time, 28,000 a year, which is quite low compared to the other one, which is also full-time but 41k. But as you can see, the salaries are really varied for the same role, doing pretty much the same thing with the same qualifications. So just be really careful at looking at where you can fit in. So this one requires you to be a registered member of the BACP or equivalent, experience of working with a variety of client presentations, and a minimum of 2 years post-qualification experience. and the minimum requirement of diploma level counselling qualification. So the most common themes I think you can see across all of these, the reason I was showing you guys so you can see the common themes in the counselling job market, is being registered with an accredited body and having some experience in working and having a minimum of diploma level qualification. And I guess some of the higher paying jobs are probably going to be masters. If you'd like me to do like another video going through job adverts and kind of seeing what qualifications and requirements you need, let me know in the comments below. My advice would be, as soon as you're qualified, get registered with an accrediting body. And another tip is just get as much experience as you can. And the higher the qualification you have, the easier it is for you to get jobs, because they're looking for somebody who has as much experience as possible. So me, who's going to be graduating with a master's level with 400 client hours, versus somebody who's doing a PhD, when they graduate, they'll be graduate with an accredited level. So that's very different. So they're more likely to get a job than I am because they've got an accredited status. So the only difference is that your level of qualification doesn't really matter if you don't have specific specialist training. If you want to work with trauma, addiction, abuse and other things, you'll need to have experience with that regardless of the level of your qualification. So that's all I have to say for this video. So feel free to tune into my playlist, which is all things counselling. So everything you need to know about becoming a counsellor, the journey towards becoming a counsellor, I've got a playlist on that, and this video will be in that as well. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.